tonight.
It is highly unethical.
Opinions are voiced as Regina City Council debates adding fluoride to the city's drinking water. The FSIN adds its voice to the debate around Western separation. And closing arguments have wrapped in the trial of a former director of a private Christian school.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It is Friday, May 2nd, and the CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. I'm Ethan Williams. Thank you for joining us. The debate around fluoride is back at Regina City Council. Dozens of delegates are speaking for or against adding it to the city's drinking water. Chris Edwards reports.
As we look back in history, there are no shortage of examples of products that had initially been deemed safe and were later found to have catastrophic consequences.
Catastrophic consequences was a recurring topic at Regina City Hall on Friday. Several members of the public spoke in favor of Councillor Bezos' motion to postpone introducing fluoride to Regina's water supply. They say fluoride isn't safe and shouldn't be forced upon them. But not everyone agreed. Several pediatricians and doctors also testified. They say that the science behind fluoride in water has been settled and that Regina should follow the lead of several other major cities in Canada.
The levels proposed are safe and have been endorsed by every medical association, including our Canadian Pediatric Society, Canadian Medical Association.
Petrick says the health benefits of adding fluoride in the water are immense and that doing so would reduce cavities by 25%. She also says the amount people would actually consume in their drinking water is perfectly safe.
Dose makes the poison, and fluoride at recommended levels is safe and effective and has been studied and proven to be so.
But for some advocates, the question goes beyond the science. They say they should have the right to decline fluoride and make their own choices for their health.
It comes down to bodily autonomy and consent. I don't think that a city council should be choosing on behalf of all of the citizens whether they want their water medicated.
Regina City Council is still hearing from delegates, but it's planning to hold a vote on the decision on Friday night. Chris Edwards, CBC News, Regina.
Firefighters in Prince Albert are sounding the alarm about staffing. They say they're short several firefighters, and in recent weeks, that's left part of the city unprotected. Right now, PA has 12 firefighters working together on a shift. The firefighters union says there should be at least 16 as per national standards to fight a fire at a single-family home, and at least 27 to battle a high-rise building fire. The union has claimed on social media that much of the city was recently left unprotected due to understaffing and no backup crews.
We were engaged in an emergency or a fire, for instance, a house fire, and all staff that were on duty at the time were at that emergency. There was nobody else to respond to any other calls. So if another call came in, there would be nobody to respond to that emergency because we were already engaged in emergency operations elsewhere.
Everybody likes to have a little bit more, a little bit better, but the practicality of it is we can't staff for every situation. So sure, it would be great to double our workforce, but it's not realistic at all to double our workforce in Prince Albert, the size of the city that it is.
Paul says a new fire hall is being planned to improve response times. The contract between the city and the firefighters expired last year. The union wants better pay, more staffing, and medical benefits. The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations says it has serious concerns. This after Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's changes around referendums that some say makes it easier to take a vote on separation from Canada. The FSIN says that fundamentally ignores the nation-to-nation treaties signed between First Nations and the Crown. U of R professor and treaty rights expert Danette Starblanket says if such a referendum came up in Saskatchewan, nations would take a heavy stance in the same way First Nations in Quebec did during the separatist movement there in the 1970s.
We're very aware of those positions of First Nations in Quebec. And what it is taking that stand to assert your rights, and that will happen. So we're starting to see that happen now. We saw what happened with Idle No More movements, for example, and so it's not going to happen easily. And I don't see it happening. I think the resistance, the fight against it will be just too strong. They can't take the treaty areas. They can't take in Saskatchewan treaties 2, 4, 6, 8, or 10. They can't, and again, Treaty 6, Treaty 4, those are strong treaty territories. And I think you would see a real battle on your hands if that was to move forward.
FSIN Chief Bobby Cameron says the treaties were made with the Crown, not with provinces, and they remain binding regardless of political aspirations. So where does the province go from here with a Liberal win and talk of separatism? Premier Scott Moe is vowing to work with Prime Minister Mark Carney to reset the province's often strained relationship with Ottawa. Post-media political columnist Murray Mandrick shared his thoughts with the Morning Edition's political panel.
We have a plethora of problems. We have canola, 100% tariffs with from China. We have problems with Bill C-69 in terms of the building of the pipeline. The carbon tax is gone, but there's certainly lingering effects of it that are problematic. We have a huge problem related to how do we just simply light our house if we can't burn coal. That goes back to obviously a Stephen Harper promise, but that's another thing. These are all legitimate things that Scott Moe raises and a Saskatchewan premier should be working on. However, the problem is the political one. He actually married into the Conservative Party with his endorsement of Poilievre, and that certainly satisfied a huge voice in not only just Saskatchewan, but outside Saskatchewan. I think the ground zero of it is now the Alberta legislature, and Premier Daniel Smith there reconstructing their referendum legislation so that it might be easier to have a referendum in Alberta on separation. This is a huge issue. I think we'll probably get into it in a moment. But that's Scott Moe that can't seem to find the balance between basically saying, I am a Canadian and I absolutely denounce Western separatism, and the Scott Moe says, I am a proud Saskatchewan person promoting Saskatchewan and dealing with Saskatchewan issues. It's where he's always had a problem. And I think he had a huge problem with that again this week post-election. And I'm really intrigued as to see how all this plays out.
Closing arguments have wrapped in the trial of the former director of a private Christian school in Saskatoon. John Olabobokun is charged with 9 counts of assault with a weapon for allegedly paddling students. The charges date back 20 years when he was the director at Christian Center Academy. Former students testified they were paddled repeatedly for various infractions, but Olabobokun testified he did not paddle them. His defense lawyer says the testimony from his client and other defense witnesses raises reasonable doubt.
We're asking the judge to consider the evidence of the defense without even going further and looking at the frailties of the Crown's case. Our witnesses were very solid, and we're optimistic on a good result.
So it was really emotional, I think, to rehear, some of those points. But at the end of the day, I believe that justice will be served.
The Crown argued that if the judge believes the students' testimonies, there is no defense for using a wooden paddle to strike them. The judge is set to deliver her decision on July 21st. University of Regina students will soon be paying more for tuition. This after the university also cut the budget for all its academic and administration departments by 2%. This fall, most tuition and fees at the U of R will rise by 4%. The university says cuts are also necessary to manage its budget. It says it has seen a steep decline in international students and fewer domestic enrollments.
Don't believe they're going to get in. And I would say the fear is justified because the reality is that they're not being processed in an efficient manner and they are being rejected in far higher numbers than before. It's a reaction to what we're seeing more generally, as you know, about the attitudes that manifested over the last year with respect to immigration.
The university says it has made every effort to limit tuition increases while keeping post-secondary education affordable and accessible. The provincial government cut $6 million in post-secondary education funding in its latest budget. Well, gardeners, get ready. We have entered a warm spell that will have those green thumbs itching to get planting. And while it might still be a little too early to get the seeds into the ground, yes, preparations for the growing season have begun, including, as you see here, at the Grant Road Community Gardens in South Regina. Of course, the question now is, how long will the warmth last, and will we get some rain to quench the dry soil? Well, Helena Mahalik has all those details in her forecast when we come back. This coming week, Europe marks 80 years since the surrender of Nazi Germany. One of the first ceremonies was a Canadian event remembering the May 5th liberation of the Netherlands. And Canadian veterans were there. Chris Brown reports.
That 22 Canadian Second World War veterans could even make this trip to the Netherlands is remarkable. At 98, Felix Labelle is one of the youngest.
It's with humility that I think of those who died. And when someone shakes my hand, I tell them, you're shaking the hand in the name of the ones who died for our country.
In a ceremony with a strong Indigenous presence, Canadian and Dutch officials lauded those who fought and those who didn't make it home. 7,600 Canadian soldiers were killed during the vicious battles that would eventually liberate the Netherlands in May 1945, including Barbara Wood's father, Robert Kindersley, an engineer. He was killed days after fighting in Europe ended when a German bomb he was trying to defuse detonated.
He had that one job to do. His suitcase was packed. Unfortunately, it was a booby. Came to him, killed him immediately. He had sent me a letter to say, I'm going to be home for your birthday. My birthday was in June. He didn't make it to my 9th birthday.
During the war, Honorary Lieutenant General Richard Romer was a reconnaissance pilot. Now 101, he fears some lessons of the war are being forgotten, as alliances that have protected Europe since then are fraying.
To see it starting to come apart a little bit is not very encouraging, because the big nations like Russia and others will take advantage if they possibly can. So I'm hopeful that Canada will do its part fully.
For the Dutch, the valor of the Canadians who liberated them is taught in schools. This was a chance to say thanks to some personally, likely for the last time. Chris Brown, CBC News, Grosbeak.
And weather specialist Helena Mahalik joining us now. Seems we've just decided to skip right over spring and go into summer, Helena.
Totally, Ethan. It seems we've skipped an entire season with temperatures feeling much more like summer. I definitely think I needed sunscreen while heading out. Let's see just how warm it got in south and central Saskatchewan today. As we can see, temperatures in the 20-degree mark throughout most of this part of the province, with temperatures in central even closer to the 30-degree mark. So overall feeling very warm throughout the province. Same thing in the north, the Churchill region hovering even above the 20-degree mark, and the far north at or above the 10-degree mark there. So overall a very warm day in the province, because we also didn't see any rain or any snow, making for a very clear and nice Friday evening. We're seeing no cloud coverage and just clear skies. As we get into Saturday afternoon, that is still the trend. We're seeing just a very beautiful, Clear day as temperatures will be quite high. As we get into Sunday early morning, though, there may be some rain in the far north around the Stony Rapids area. By Sunday afternoon, that could move into the Churchill region, around Prince Albert and La Ronge, and maybe even some in southwestern Saskatchewan near the Kindersley area. But as we get into Monday early morning, we're seeing some rain throughout the entire province, with much in south and central Saskatchewan. So we could see some rain around Swift Current and Regina Monday. Friday evening, we're seeing a little bit of a breeze in the southeast around Estevan and Yorkton. By Saturday afternoon, that's going to move more to the north, where we might see 40 kilometers an hour winds gusting around the Stony Rapids area. As we get into Saturday evening, those 40 kilometers an hour winds are going to move to the southeastern part of the province, so a little bit of a breezy day there in Regina. Sunday evening, though, most of the province, again, feeling that breeze. Prince Albert in the northern grain belt, up to 45 kilometers an hour winds there. So we will see a bit of a breezy day throughout the weekend, but you know, the warm temperatures are going to make things feel even better. And as we get into the weekend, we are seeing temperatures rising. We're seeing a high pressure system rolling in, bringing us those nice high 20-degree weather. It's going to feel even closer to the 30-degree mark for some areas of the province, and it's just going to be feeling very warm. But as we get into Monday, we're seeing some of that high pressure roll out, and that's because some areas will be getting some rain, so things may be feeling just a little cooler, Ethan, but overall a beautiful weekend in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, you mentioned the sunscreen there. I don't know about you, but I usually require about an SPF 10,000 in order to survive. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I'm quite pale, so I think SPF, 1,000 this weekend.
Okay, you and me both. Thanks so much, Helena.
Thanks, Ethan.
Well, have you ever wanted to become a social media influencer? Well, making it a career may seem like a bit of a long shot, but for one Regina teacher, it's become a reality. We caught up with Steve Boots, who's traded the classroom for TikTok.
Hi, I'm Steve Boots. I stepped away from my job as a teacher to become a full-time content creator on social media.
Canada has a new prime minister. Let's talk about tariffs, friends. My co-host has chosen to join me for this segment. I want to be really clear.
I had always kind of been interested in social media, and I used it to talk about politics and to consume politics content. In January of, I think it was 2022, I was avoiding working on report cards. I was working on report cards and I was like 8 hours into working on them and I needed a break. And I decided to try to make a TikTok. It was kind of intentionally boring. It was about the head of the SHA resigning, and I thought, well, this is a very niche thing. I'll just try out the tools. And it got like 70,000 views, and I had about 5,000 followers in the first day. And I was like, I guess this is a thing I do now. And now I just try to keep ahead of it.
This week's not so much a favorite political moment as one that I just want to share, because I think you need to see how absolutely wild it is.
Teaching is awesome, but it's limited. You're only going to be able to work with 20, 30, 40 people in a year. And so early on, actually, my ambition was to become a principal or work at the division office level in order to have a bigger, broader impact. And somewhere along the line, it became very clear that the biggest, broadest impact I could have was on social media. I was really struggling with just what the job stresses were doing to me and my body and my health. And it was sort of that realization of this isn't sustainable anymore and starting to look at other possibilities for myself. And so I would say during the medical leave that was to deal with the struggles of the job, that's when I knew that it was time to try something different.
This person's asking a very valid question. How do I not get exhausted doing this stuff every day? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is I worked for 16 years as a middle school teacher. People being confidently wrong is just sort of a thing you get used to.
Teaching is one of the most stable things going, right? You know what you're going to make, you know where your check is going to come from, you know you have job security, you know sort of the arc of your year and when you'll have time off, when you're on, and all those things. With content creation, it's so much more variable. It's so much more depends on the day, depends on the week, depends on the month. And for somebody like me, where I'm talking about current events, it even depends on whether or not there's interesting news that day. So it's awesome because it's very liberating. Like my wife has MS, and so for me, being able to just stop work and go take care of her when she needs it is worth so much more than a little more salary, right? And so it's also recognition that there's different sources of value here. If you are considering becoming a content creator, there are an infinite number of variables. There's the algorithm, there's the audience, there's all of that stuff. You can't control any of those variables. What you can control is the quality of content you put out and the hard work that you put in. And so long as you focus on those and making good stuff is your true north, you'll find your way.
Well, how's this for a prescription to cure back pain? Yes, a roller coaster ride. Ursel is 85 years old and lives in Germany. 13 years ago, she went for a ride on a coaster on a whim, and pretty soon she felt something stretching. And since then, she's used the ride to ease her back pain. Nice work. All right, stay with us. We'll have more news after the break. Prime Minister Mark Carney is going to meet U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House next week. The Prime Minister made the announcement at a press conference on Friday. It is a high-stakes meeting because of the trade war between Canada and the U.S. and Trump's repeated annexation threats. Carney said he's expecting to have a, quote, difficult but constructive talk in Washington on Tuesday.
You go to these meetings well prepared, understanding the objectives of your counterpart, and always acting in the best interest of Canada, and we'll go from there.
Carney said his priorities will be discussing tariffs and Canada's broader relationship with the U.S. Political observers say the meeting could set the stage for negotiations on a new trade and security pact between the two countries. And Helene is back with a forecast made for shorts and t-shirts.
It's definitely time to break out the sunglasses and the shorts. It's going to be so warm this weekend, Ethan. Let's see just how warm it's going to get in Regina. Temperatures are going to be in the high 20s, even close to the 30-degree mark, and the sun is going to be sticking with us this weekend. A little bit of a breeze, and then as we get into Monday, we're going to see some rainfall coming in, a 50% chance, which is going to drop temperatures down to the low teens. But as the rest of the work week goes on, we're seeing that sun come back out and temperatures continue to rise, and we're going to get back up to those high plus 20s near the end of the work week. Still a few days breezy here and there, and we will be seeing overnight lows that are quite warm for this time of year, well above average. It's much the same story in Saskatoon. A very warm weekend, temperatures in the high 20s, and the sun is sticking with us. Again, some rain on Monday and temperatures in the high teens, about a 60% chance. But then as we get into the rest of the week, sunny skies and temperatures getting back up to those high 20s, even close to below the 30-degree mark, and above seasonal temperatures for overnight lows, Ethan. So just a beautiful week overall and feeling quite warm in general.
Yeah, exactly. Average highs that should be seen in July. That is crazy. Helena, thanks so much for this.
Thanks, Ethan.
And that is it for us for this week. For more news anytime, of course, you can always head to cbc.ca/sask. You can always subscribe to our CBC Saskatchewan YouTube channel as well. That's where you'll find this program. You can also download the CBC News app on your smartphone or tablet. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend.